Hi there, welcome to Worcester, welcome to Activate Worcester. This is a show, this is our maiden voyage, if you will, and hopefully it'll be sailing for a long time. And what we're hoping to do with the show is to basically discuss issues that affect and impact everybody who can hear this show, who's a Worcester area resident. We'll be dealing with a lot of topical issues as they arise. Certainly many of them will be political, particularly in a year like this with so many very, very important contests coming up. We'll be discussing senior-related issues, which is something that's near and dear to my heart. And we'll also be discussing issues of returning veterans. What does that really mean? We'll be getting into it as the show continues. We would also really be happy to get as much feedback as possible. And you'll have on the screen very, very shortly, you'll have an Activate Worcester site that I'd like you to use for comments, positive, negative. We want to hear from you, and we look forward to it. The actual format of the show is non-confrontational. Hopefully it'll be fun. It'll be comfortable. It'll be relaxed. And the basic format that you'll see, there'll be 2 co-hosts in every show. In addition to the co-hosts, we'll have a guest, a single guest. So we'll be able to learn where that guest is coming from, what issues that they want to basically touch base on, and can educate all of us, the viewer and certainly the hosts as well. And my co-host for this episode is a good friend of mine named Chris Pinto. Chris is a major originator in the whole Activate Worcester, which is what the topic of the show will be tonight. And Chris is a longtime resident of the city. He has 3 children, all of whom have been educated in the system. And Chris is somebody who's been very, very active in Worcester issues for a long time and understands what needs to be done, and I think you'll see that. Because this is our maiden voyage tonight, Chris wore something very, very special. It's a particularly clean bowling shirt that he has. And without further ado, with that sterling intro, let me kick it over to Chris.
You know, if you knew how hot it was in the studio, you know that Ron's going to have a tough time tonight. The air conditioning's not doing so well. So yeah, I was born in the city. I came from a big family of 7. But I think what's more important is not the past, but what we're going to do going forward. So our special guest tonight is Bonnie Johnson, who was kind of the inspiration for Activate Worcester. Bonnie's a mother of 4. She homeschooled her kids for 16 years. Clearly, she's a great community activist. Some of her accomplishments are that she stopped the Hobart Mall from moving into Shrewsbury and Boylston. She got rid of an accused pedophile, superintendent of the Boylston Berlin Public Schools. That campaign, I'm sorry, I skipped over a little bit here. She's a supporter of Scott Brown and a graduate of Clark University. But like many of us, when Scott Brown won, it gave us a lot of hope that we could turn this one-party state around. And that's what got her involved, and I think that's where a lot of people met each other.
Yes.
Current things that she's been working on was the abatements. There's a lot of that in the news lately. And cleaning up the voter rolls. So I think Bonnie is fiscally conservative like the rest of us, and we were lucky to recently have her win as our state committee person here in Worcester. So welcome, Bonnie.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Bonnie, tell us a little bit about why you decided to get active rather than, and I'm not just talking about Activate Worcester, let's go back 10, 15, 16 years. Why did you decide, at what point, what was the linchpin? What made you move forward, as they say, get off the couch and get into the action? What made you do this?
I've always been an activist in some way, shape, or form throughout my life, and probably came from my parents, and they just instilled the principle in me to care about others and work with others and be concerned about issues going on in your community. And so I've taken those issues and worked with the ones that were on my heart to work with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I know about you is that you homeschool. With all the money that's being spent, and you're a Boylston resident, And the city of Worcester, as we know, roughly 2 out of every 3 tax dollars are being devoted to school and school-related issues. Why would you pull your children away from the traditional school system and homeschool them?
Well, my reason for homeschooling really didn't have anything to do with the public funding. It had everything to do with God had really placed it on my heart to homeschool my kids, first and foremost. And secondly, my oldest especially, at the time going through the school system, really needed to be challenged additionally. She wasn't being challenged. She was very bored in school. I wasn't able to help her get challenged in school. And at the time, there was no school choice, so my options were very limited. And I really just think that our path for our family was homeschooling, and it worked great. We just have had a great 16 years of homeschooling in our house.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's great. What do you use as a criteria to determine how well they've done?
Well, my oldest she homeschooled through high school, and she has gone on to Allegheny College. She graduated with honors. Her thesis was one of the top 10 that was announced at the school, if you call that, if that's what you call doing well. She has a heart for the African people. She has been to Malawi and Kenya twice, and she just got back last Sunday from 6 months there. She's become fluent in Swahili. Homeschooling gave her the opportunity to work with what made her tick. And my other children also, what made them tick.
And they haven't had any trouble assimilating with their peer group?
That's a misnomer, in my opinion. They talk about homeschoolers not being socialized. A good homeschool parent is going to be very active and very social in the community and with others. The difference is that my kids were not always with kids of only their own age, which is the way the public school works. And I'm not putting that down, but there is a difference. And so we've been in nursing homes, we've been, we've done lots of things, and it has exposed them to a wider range of things than if they had been in the public school they would have been exposed to.
Now, speaking of Africa, didn't you recently return from Africa?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
I went to Kenya to visit my daughter, who I was missing dearly, and she had been there 3 months, and so I took one of my youngest daughters and an uncle, and we went over, and we visited her there, and we went to Nairobi. We were in Nairobi for 3 or 4 days, and then we went to Mombasa, and we stayed on the Indian Ocean, which was vacation. Nairobi was a lot of work. We went to schools, and we helped people, and my daughter has got a very social life there with the Nairobi people. Her goal is to become Kenyan while she's there, and so she walks everywhere, and it is a whole different lifestyle than what we have here. We have no idea how grateful we should be for what we have today in this country until you go over and see what people do not have.
What are some of the differences? What are some of the things you saw there?
I could show you pictures of schools that the children are literally sitting on a 3-inch wide board all day, and they have a 3 to 4 inch wide desk, and there's 6 of them this wide, and that's where they sit all day. Here's one of the differences that I thought was incredible. We walked into the 3rd grade classroom, and the kids were reciting something. Mm-hmm. So, we knocked on the door expecting the teacher to answer. There was no teacher in the room yet. The kids were doing this on their own. They want to learn. In America, we all get the option to learn. There, they do not all get the option to learn. And they are there because they want to learn. And we just have no idea the privileges that we have in this country that we take for granted.
Makes you sad, doesn't it?
It does.
But it is what it is. Do you see anything there that we could emulate and copy in the Worcester school system? If there was one thing that we could do.
The desire to learn. A desire to learn. Our children need to have a desire to learn. And so many of them do not. They have a desire to pass the day, to be in a structured environment, get through what they have to do.
But you can't teach that.
You cannot teach that. You can't. I understand that.
It has to come from inside. So.
Although these kids had to make a choice. It's like in order for them to go to college, it would be a monumental task for anyone from Kenya to go on to even a high school, never mind a college. And yet our kids just take it for granted. Our country is taking it for granted. And they think that because they get through 12th grade, they should go on. And
it's their right.
It's
the next step. Yeah.
And so you learn something when you go out of our country and see what other people are doing or aren't doing.
I do have a question as it relates to that. Again, back to Kenya. Did you get any sort of sense as to the amount of parental involvement?
In general, the men are not as visible in the households with the children, with the wives, and I'm sure there's a lot of divorce. In my daughter's case, her homestay program through her college required them to live with 2 different families. One family was single, the other family had a husband and wife who were a very loving, caring couple together, who work together, who have 2 children, who are just wonderful people. I've now met them. And they rented an apartment big enough for my daughter to stay with them when she went back for her 6 months into Nairobi. And so she's been blessed, and I got to meet them and the kids, and it was an incredible blessing. I don't know that that's always the case, but in her cases, the cases we experienced, it was a great experience for her.
One of the things that you'll hear when you speak to educators in the system, whether it's Worcester or an adjacent community, is they would like to see more involvement with the parents of the children. Okay? And there's a direct correlation between student performance and parental involvement. Did you see any of that in Kenya at all? Could you comment on that?
I don't think the children that were leaving classes were going home with homework. I think in the school that I visited that we helped at, I was there 2 years ago and I helped, and back this year. You know, it is all those kids can do to eat and survive on the outside after school. The school now provides them with a meal, which I guarantee there isn't a person in this audience that would eat the food that these kids were eating. Never mind drink the water that it was being cooked with. But this is all they have, and it's nutritious to them. And they've shaved all the kids' heads this time. And that's for, obviously, health reasons. So just existing beyond school. School, they love. They love to come. They love to learn. It is, and the parents love it because they know what it gives, the opportunities it can provide those kids.
Now, one thing in terms of Bonnie's experiences with school, Bonnie was and continues to be very, very helpful to Donna Calorio. Donna Calorio won the recount last November and is now sitting on the school committee here in Worcester. And Donna's concept really was to be fiscally conservative and to be aware of where the dollars were being spent. And I believe I might have mentioned this earlier, that roughly 2 out of every 3 tax dollars that are being pulled in this city are being spent for the children in the schools. Okay. From your perspective, thinking about Donna's campaign promises and so forth, how has she lived up to those promises today?
I think Donna Calorio has done a fabulous job as a school committee member. There's a learning curve that goes with everything. I think Donna has done everything and more that she said she's going to do. She is very, very involved in Donna could speak better to the actual things that she has been involved with. Well,
one thing I do know, will remember, one of her campaign pledges was that she wanted to visit literally, I think there's 45 or 50 schools. She wanted to pay a visit to each one within the first 6 to 9 months of her tenure. And I believe that through the end of June, she had, I don't remember the exact number.
She completed that by the end of April, and she was, and the teachers and the principals, they were just overwhelmed that somebody from school committee had gone into the schools and talked with them and asked them what their thoughts were about school. She sat down with every principal, to my knowledge, and toured the buildings And she is the only school committee member that has done that. Many of them don't even know who the school committee people, some of them are.
One of the things that's positive about that, forgetting Donna Colorio for a second, is getting that feedback going. There are certain areas in this city where the schools perform very, very well. And of what I understand, it's because there's a direct correlation, again, between parent involvement and children's performance. They're involved with the teachers. They take a look at what the agendas are. They take a look at the protocol. They provide feedback. In other words, it's very much of an interactive kind of a thing. They're not delegating everything to the school system to take care of the kids. And the results are pretty obvious. And if folks do get involved with children, things happen. Chris, in your case, you have 3 kids. Tell us a little bit about your involvement with them.
So my opinion of the public schools in Worcester?
Well, not so much your opinion. Well, if you want to throw that in,
I mean,
that's great.
Worcester has great primary, great grammar schools. You know, the first 6 grades, the preschool programs, the kindergarten programs are good. I think the biggest challenge that kids in this city face is middle school is tough years. You know, the kids are trying to figure out who they are, and they end up having some discipline problems. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of that's been alleviated by our middle schools. They now have these clusters or schools within the schools. And if your kid is smart, like you know, lucky and blessed that my children are all very smart, I attribute that to reading to them at a very young age. I think that's the most important thing anyone can do if they're having kids now is read to them. Even before they can even speak, start reading to them. They pick it up. Some people say they pick it up when they're still in the womb. We didn't go that far as to read to them in the womb, but there's nothing more important than reading for anyone's kids. So we were lucky in middle school. My daughter was in one of the top clusters. So they kind of get isolated from some of the riffraff, if you will. You know, the kids that aren't interested in learning. So they group the kids together by, you know, how they score on the tests. Mm-hmm. So if your kid's really good in math and English, then they'll be with kids that have those similar skills. Mm-hmm. So it's worked out pretty good for us. We're actually, one of my daughters has been going to St. Mary's for a few years, and she wants a bigger school experience. So we're considering, you know, activating our school choice. And we'll know in a few weeks whether or not our 2 daughters are going to end up at Wachusett, so they can get a nice big school experience.
Great, great. Well, again, it gets back to the interactive portion of it. Bonnie clearly has been very interactive, and the results speak for themselves. And Chris, same thing with you. Without boring the viewers about my personal experiences, very much the same. And you get out of it what you put into it. And if there's one thing, and Chris hit, in my opinion, he hit it right on the button, that if there's one thing you should be working on is reading skills with your children as early as possible. And part of it is do some reading at home. Let them see you reading. Reading for pleasure is an important thing, and reading for learning is critical. And if you don't get involved with both of those components, you're going to fall by the wayside, and that's not what we want. Interesting conversation. Back to Activate Worcester.
Really?
Yes, back to Activate Worcester. Since you folks were pretty much the driving force behind this whole movement, tell us a little bit about Activate Worcester, what the goals are, and how do you plan to accomplish things?
The goal of Activate Worcester is to activate fiscally conservative people, the grassroots in the city of Worcester and beyond, regardless of party, Democrat, Republican, Independent, or unenrolled, the Green Party, there's all kinds of parties now. Regardless of party affiliation, we believe that there are loads of people who are fiscally conservative, that are concerned about where their dollars are spent. And let's face it, everybody, we, the taxpayers, are footing the bill for where the government spends the money. And there's a lot of waste in the system, and I believe it needs to be fixed. And I'm tired of it. I'm tired of the abuse, and I'm tired of the waste. And I know I've talked to people all the time. Many people are tired of this.
There's so many good stories to go along with the whole concept of being fiscally conservative. I remember when Mike Germain ran, he ran on a platform of he was going to audit the city's books. And there's people that didn't know who Mike Germain was, and they said, hey, he's going to audit the city's books. Hey, I'll give him a vote. There's probably plenty of waste there. And when Reagan was president, he had Art Laffer, who was an economist for an advisor to Reagan, and he brought in about 2,000 of his friends that were accountants, and they audited the federal government for free. And they found that they were paying for $10,000 toilets and $300 hammers. And the end result of that big audit was that they could cut taxes 30% and get rid of all the waste and not reduce services at all. But in municipalities around America now, it just seems that we're all just paying more taxes for less services. So, I wish Germain hadn't gotten beaten back once he got in that city council seat, away from that concept of auditing the city's books. I don't know if it'll ever happen, but if we can get some fiscally conservative people on the city council that aren't going to kowtow to the powers that are actually running this city, then maybe we'll get that audit someday, and we'll find out where all the waste is.
Bonnie, you talked about waste in general terms. Any specific things that you can relate to?
I think there's a few things in the city that we can relate to. We could go back to the schools. And because I have worked so closely with Donna Colorio, I'm aware of some numbers that to me are just very staggering. We have 44 public schools in Worcester. 2/3 of the budget goes to 44 public schools. And I believe there's 24,000, give or take 1,000 pupils in those schools. The administrators, the non-union people running the schools, there's over 1,000 of them. This is one administrator to every 24 students. That does not include teachers, janitors, cafeteria members, and all the other people it takes to run our schools. One administrator to every 24 children. I just look at that and think, that's abuse of our tax dollars. We don't need to be spending that kind of money. And I may not be a resident of Worcester, but I know that a lot of my tax dollars get spread around this state, and they come into Worcester. And it's something that we should all be concerned about. And I am all for a good education for our kids. There's about 2,400, or there's about 2,000 teachers in the school system. And, maybe we need 2,500 teachers and 500 less administrators. I think we ought to be working and dealing with the children. That money should be going into educating our kids.
Although the school system is roughly 2/3 of the budget, there's still another third, which is also huge, another $100 million. But from the perspective of Activate Worcester, what can the viewer do to get involved, to see what's really going on, to have kind of a feedback framework and actually get involved? In other words, stop grousing and get moving.
I believe there are so many grassroots people out there that are fiscally conservative. I encourage you to do one of two things. You can go to the website, www.activateworcester.com, and you can sign up there. There's a link. Click on it to sign up. I will either, or someone on my team will either be calling you, or we will be emailing you with opportunities of what's going on. We encourage you to get involved. The election, November 6th, every fiscal conservative person, take a part of the day off. I will put you to work somewhere, somehow. We need your help on election day. We need to get out the vote of other conservatives, and you can help us to do that. If you're tired of the abuse of power and money, get involved with us. We are trying to do something about it. Or you can call me. I know there are people that don't have access to a computer and don't have access to email. They can call me. Leave a message. My phone number is 508-335-5273. And I just challenge you, get off.
You want to repeat that?
508
For the West Coast.
335-5273. And I just challenge every person listening to get involved in the elections for November 6th.
You mean they have to stop yelling at their TV?
Stop yelling at the TV. There are many people that have come. Our first event with at Activate Worcester, April 21st, was Senator Scott Brown came out, and he made the best quote at that. He said, "The government has got to stop using the credit card and start using the checkbook."
And the best thing I heard about Scott Brown the other day, it was a perfect sort of framing of what Scott Brown has meant to Republicans in Massachusetts. The one thing that people have learned from having Scott Brown as senator is Republicans don't have horns. They're not the devil, as we are frequently painted by the liberals.
One of the things about Scott Brown that I think is very, very impressive is that he is not party-driven, he is issue-driven.
Yep.
And
he hasn't always voted the way I want him to.
Understood, but that's a good thing.
Yes,
that's a good thing.
Exactly.
He's voting.
Yes, maybe.
He's voting for. He's really voting from his conscience, and he's voting for what he thinks is right for
On the campaign trail, he said he'd be an independent, and he certainly proved that.
Has he ever? Has he ever? One of the things that we should kind of sum it all up in, as you guys know, I'm a clerk down at the Zion Lutheran Church, and I go back to last November, perfect day, all sorts of major elections that were very topical, very relevant to the people who are looking at this program right now. We had less than 20% of all registered voters come out and vote. And of those 20%, roughly 15% cast a vote for school committee. So that's one of the reasons we really need
and hence
to get
we got
involved.
Donna Calorio, fiscally
Yes.
conservative,
Yes,
independent candidate.
Yes, we did, as a city,
Thank you
which is a
to
good
those
thing.
of you who voted.
But I think the real point here is we need to get active. We need to be aware of the issues, get involved.
Stop being apathetic.
Stop being apathetic, thank you. And it doesn't matter, as Donna said, if you're Republican, Democrat, etc. Get involved with the issues and speak to the issues and get involved. Your dollars are involved. Your kids are involved. I want to close it out at this point. Thank you for watching. We look forward to seeing you again in the future. Chris?